Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Cito Beltran. Welcome to the program Agenda. Today is September 1, 2020. It's Tuesday. And for all of you who are celebrating Christmas in advance, well, have a good time. But for the rest of us, it's just another day in paradise. In any case, welcome to the program, and we hope you will stick around because today is going to be very interesting. We are going to talk about a political topic, but I'm not going to do much of the talking. It will be, as usual, a resource person with a different twist. We are going to do a two-part thing. First part, early in the program, we will speak with a political scientist, expert, who will discuss with us this proposal or this idea or this topic that Senator Panfilo Ping Lacson is pursuing, yung bagang designated survivor. Diyan tayo magaling eh. Pag may nakita tayo sa television o sa pelikula, pinipick up natin kagad. In any case, designated survivor, it's a concept where what happens when everyone in the hierarchy of leadership dies. Plane crash, war, whatever. Sino yung magiging designated survivor if the chain of leadership is wiped out? In any case, we will speak with our first guest. That will be attorney and law professor George Garcia. And after Professor Garcia, we will have a shift in the program. We are going to listen para tayong web in air. Kasi iba sabi webinar. Ang spelling web in air. Okay, in any case, we will listen to three speakers. First will be Senate Minority Leader Franklin Drilon, Congresswoman Stella Quimbo, and Professor Julio Teehankee. Ang kanilang mga pagsasalitaan ay tungkol sa political dynasty. So nagkatugma-tugma lang po. And I have to be honest, we didn't plan this. This came to us courtesy of Robbie Alampay, our friends in TV5, who passed the topic to us, made a suggestion, and we, with Akademyang Pilipino, mamaya po explain ko yan, we are going to do a sort of agenda webinar where we will ask those three guests to speak on political dynasties. And God willing, if we have time, we will ask them questions pa. Okay, so that will be our format for today. Please, don't be surprised. Baka kasi sabihin nyo, ano nangyari? Ba't parang naging webinar? It's about political dynasties because medyo timely and medyo disturbing kasi na may mga nagko-comment na panood si Presidente kahapon, sabi kawawa naman si Presidente, parang may sakit, pagod na, and then next morning you find an article in the paper where it says Senator Ping Lacson is pushing for or is suggesting we seriously consider this concept of designated survivor. Sabi nga ng mga matatanda, baka mapalo pa tayo ni Presidente Duterte niyan eh. Buhay pa ako, pinapatay niyo na ako. Yan yung mga line na tatandaan ko sa mga lolo. In any case, we'll discuss more of that later. But in the meantime, here are the stories from the front page of the Philippine Star. More businesses are allowed to reopen today as Metro Manila remains under general community quarantine or GCQ for one more month. The same goes for Bulacan, Batangas, and the cities of Tacloban and Bacolod. Cavite and Laguna, which host special economic zones, are eased into the most lenient modified GCQ, just like the rest of the country. Only Iligan City is under the stricter Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine or MECQ after local officials asked to return to strict protocols as 21 barangays in the city recorded third-degree local transmissions. Kumbaga, pamilya na, but that's good news, especially for Cavite and Laguna. Pero paalala lang po sa mga tiga Cavite at Laguna, especially in the economic zone, especially those in factories, please laang higpitan ninyo at maging conscious kayo sa social distancing, mask. Wala nang mga yosi-yosi kasi kayo po yung number one target ng COVID-19. Okay, next. After kissing the ground at the site of a recent suicide bombing attack in Jolo, President Rodrigo Duterte told soldiers that fighting is the only way to move in order to attain peace in Mindanao. Duterte admitted last Sunday that attaining peace in the South has become an impossible dream as violence continues to spark desire for vengeance, but says that soldiers must carry out their mission. Twin explosions left 15 people dead in Jolo last week in what is suspected to be a terrorist attack. At para po sa inyong hindi nakakakita ng Pangulo na humahalik sa lupa, ito, no, papakita ko ito sa inyo. I hope it's clear there. There's the President kissing the ground where the attack happened in Jolo, Sulu. In other news, President Duterte has appointed former National Bureau of Investigation Director Dante Giran as new PhilHealth Chief, replacing retired military General Ricardo Morales. Morales resigned last week due to health reasons and amidst corruption allegations in the state-run insurer. Giran is a lawyer and a public accountant, and a source of the Philippine Star says he was appointed by the president because of his expertise in accounting. Giran hails from Davao City. He was Southern Mindanao Region Director for NBI before becoming NBI chief in 2016 and retiring earlier this year. Ayan po. So, ayan, may bago na namang magiging Pangulo sa PhilHealth and we wish him luck. We seriously wish him luck. But I think the best news that we heard from last night's pronouncement, ewan ko kung nananaginip lang ako kagabi, no? Pero nadinig ko parang sinabi ni Presidente, lahat ng regional vice president out. Okay, mabait, magaling, walang ya, basta masyado na silang matagal dyan. And apparently, many of them average 20 years without relocation, without transfer, without reassignment. Kasi yun nga po nangyayari dyan sa PhilHealth. Pag may bagong presidente at biglang nagre-reassign, nagre-relocate, biglang nagkakakaso, may mga allegations of corruption, pagkatapos lahat yung mga senador, congressman, inuupakan yung mga inappoint ni presidente, pero hindi nagagalaw yung mga mafia, yung mga nandoon sa mga matagal na dyan sa PhilHealth. And lalong-lalo na yung mga regional vice president. Nasulat ko na rin po yan sa Philippine Star. So finally, I guess the president realized or has listened to what has been said in the past. Part of the problem are those who have been there for the longest of time. Okay, and finally, the Philippine Statistics Authority reminded the public that refusal to participate in the census and provision of providing false information are punishable under the law. According to one PSA official, citizens who refuse to answer the census may be punished with 1 year imprisonment and a fine of 100,000 pesos. This month, PSA enumerators are expected to engage households in a census survey. This was originally scheduled in May but was moved back due to the pandemic. Okay. Comment lang po natin dyan sa PSA na yan, yung census. Unang-una, please cooperate. Please cooperate. I've already said this. This is the third time I'm saying it, I think, in 1 week's time. It is a matter of national importance that we get a proper and accurate census. Now, having said that, maganda rin po yung binanggit ng mga tiga-PSA, lalo na yung isang kanilang OIC yata or acting in charge, na pag hindi nyo po sinagot yung census, hindi kayo nag-cooperate, pwede po kayong makulong at makasuhan. Yan po ang nagiging problema natin sa gobyerno ngayon. Lagi na lang nating inuuna yung pananakot. We always follow up. We pronounce something and then we follow it up with a threat of imprisonment or fine, whether it's face mask, face shield, or census. But no one has ever bothered to really consider to educate Filipinos regarding the value of census and statistics. Hindi po naintindihan ng maraming mamamayan ang kahalagahan nitong census na ito at pagkakalap nitong mga impormasyon na ito. Kung naintindihan nila na batay sa census, based on the census, certain allocations are given to a barangay. Certain priorities are given to a barangay. Base sa census, diyan madidetermine ng legislation, ng legislator, ng Congress, etc. Marami palang senior citizen, dapat taasan natin yung ating budget for senior citizen. Marami palang mga kabataan dito sa region na ito, dapat diyan mas maraming playground o mas maraming clinic. Maybe then Filipinos will readily and willingly cooperate. Hindi po yung takutan. Ayan na, alam niyo kahapon nung sinasabi yan sa mga balita sa radyo, pinapakinggan ko, maski ako, matanda na ako dito sa hanap buhay na ito, sa trabaho, sa bokasyon na ito na pagiging journalist, my first reaction was, excuse me, you're threatening us again? And that's our problem. I'm appealing not only to the PSA, I'm appealing doon sa mga kaibigan natin sa Communications Office. Baka maaari naman tulungan ninyo yung mga iba-ibang departamento na mag-inform and educate. Medyo, sorry po, nananahimik yata kayo, medyo gampanan natin yung trabaho natin. Let's educate the Filipinos on the value and importance of what government is doing. Don't leave it to threatening. Okay, we will move forward. Pinramp na ako. Eto, may tanong ngayon dito. Should lawmakers give the designated survivor bill a chance? Ito pong si Senator Ping Lacson called on his colleagues to start discussions on a bill authorizing the president to name a designated survivor. Excuse me, di ba ang labanan natin ay base sa medyo we have a sequence. If the president, God forbid, dies, then the vice president. If the vice president dies or is incapacitated, God forbid, then it becomes the Senate president or it becomes the Speaker of the House. Sabi raw ni Ping Lacson, paano kung pati yung Speaker of the House mamatay, sino na ang designated survivor? Ewan ko. Pagka inabot ka pa hanggang Speaker of the House, medyo ang designated survivor na natin si Lord. But let's go to to the College of Law, Dean of the Pamantasan ng Lungsod na Manila, Attorney George Garcia. Good morning, sir.
Magandang morning, Sir Cito, at magandang morning po sa lahat ng nanonood at nakikinig sa atin.
Tayo na naman, Professor. Ikaw na, I leave the floor to you, Your Honor, kasi medyo hindi ko maintindihan. We're talking about a president assigning a designated survivor, pero meron ka pang vice president, Senate president, Speaker of the House. Ano masasabi mo dito sa idea ni Senator Ping Lacson?
Actually po, Sir Cito, yung proposal naman po yung ni Senator Ping Lacson, Senate Bill number 982, it's constitutional. Nasa saligang batas naman po natin 'yan. Maaari po ay naipattern doon sa nangyari sa isang Netflix series, pero meron po kasing basihan 'yan sa United States kasi meron silang Presidential Succession Act of 1947. May batas talaga doon sa US po kasi. Dito sa ating bansa, gusto ko lang pong ipaliwanag, meron din po kasi tayong succession na nakalagay sa ating saligang batas. Kaya lamang po, Sir Cito, for clarity, gusto ko pong liwanagin para sa ating mga ordinaryong mga kababayan. Dalawa po kasi ang nakalagay sa saligang batas. Yung Article 6, Section 7, on Executive Department at saka Article 6, Section 8. Ano po yung dalawang yon, Sir Cito, para po mas maintindihan natin? Yung una ay isang presidente o vice presidente na hindi pa nag-a-assume ng office. Yung President-elect and Vice President-elect. So paano kung si President Cito Beltran ay na-elect as President pero dumating ang June 30, hindi pa siya qualified, hindi pa siya nakapag-oath, o kaya merong issue ng qualification sa kanya. So ano mangyayari? In that case, sabi ng Section 7, Sir Cito, ng Constitution, the Vice President-elect shall act as the President. Okay? The Vice President-elect shall act as the President. Yun po yung Section 7, Sir Cito.
Time out, Professor, para malinaw the Vice President-elect of the previous term or of the incoming term?
Of the incoming term.
Okay.
Of the incoming term. Wala po tayong holdover capacity. Bawal na po 'yan kasi fixed ang term ng presidente at vice presidente matatapos June 30, 6 years after mag-serve siya as president.
Okay.
So ito po ay elect pa lang na president at vice president. Paano kung ang president-elect, vice president-elect ay hindi pa makapag-assume kaagad din o makapanumpa, may problema pa. Sino ang mag-a-act as president? Ang Senate President? O kung paano kung ang Senate President incapacitated din? Sino ang mag-a-act as president? Ang Speaker of the House of Representatives. Tapos po, Sir Cito, yung pagkatapos po ng provision na yon ng Section 7, may nakalagay na ang Kongreso ay magpe-prescribe, ay mag-enact ng isang batas to prescribe how we are to choose the successor doon sa mga nakalagay na mga posisyon. Okay po, maliwanag po tayo doon. Yung po ay kapag magsisimula pa lang ng pagsisilbi ang presidente at vice president. Take note po, Sir Cito. The purpose of the Constitution is at any given time from June 30 noon kung saan magsisimula ang opisina o ang pagsisilbi ng isang president-elect, lagi dapat meron tayong presidente. Whether a permanent president elected for 6 years or an acting president. Dapat lagi tayong may presidente. Pwedeng walang vice president, pero we must always have a president. Kaya nga, vice president, and then Senate president, and then speaker. Paano kung bago magsimula ng pagsisilbi ang presidente, namatay na kaagad ang presidente? The vice president automatically becomes the president. Hindi papasok yung Senate President, hindi papasok ang Speaker of the House. Papasok lang yung pagiging acting ng either Senate President or Speaker of the House kung sakasakali na hindi rin kakapagsilbi ang Vice President. Okay, pumunta po tayo, Sir Cito, doon sa pinagbasihan ng panukalang batas ni Senator Ping Lacson, yung pong Section 8. Ano po yung Section 8, yung sumunod sa Section 7 na provision? Ito naman po, Sir Cito, ay sitwasyon na kung saan nagsisilbi na ang presidente. Halimbawa, nakakaisang taon na o 2 taon na ang presidente. Pagkatapos ang presidente kasama ang vice president ay namatay. Ano mangyayari? Magiging presidente ba ang Senate President? Magiging presidente po siya, sabi ng Section 8, in an acting capacity lang. Until we are able to elect a new president. Ang reason, death, permanent incapacity, resignation or removal from office ng president and vice president. Take note po, laging papasok ang Senate President kung walang presidente at wala pong vice president. Okay po. Ngayon, paano kung president, vice president, Senate President at ang Speaker of the House, yung pang-apat sa order, ay hindi available din, namatay, permanent incapacity, death, or resignation, sinong papalit? Yun po yung wala. Yun po yung gustong ayusin ni Senator Ping Lacson na dapat merong tayong papalit kung sakali yung apat na yun ay hindi maging available, namatay din, permanent incapacity, dapat may paraan na may papalit. Sir Cito, I would like to dig deeper. Sa akin pong palagay, with all due respect, sa akin pong palagay na sa aking maliit na pangunawa, palagay ko po mas maganda ma-expand po ni Senator Ping Lacson ng ating Kongreso yung pong panukalang batas na yan. Sapagkat, Sir Cito, ang sinasabi po ng saligang batas, Congress shall prescribe or provide for a law. Pag napansin nyo po, kanina ko pa po binabanggit, sa Section 7 may nakalagay na doon, before the assumption to office of the Senate of the President-elect and the Vice President, Congress shall provide. Dito naman po, yung nag-a-assume na ang Presidente, Congress shall provide. Laging may Congress shall provide. Sa aking palagay po, ang mukhang hinahandle lang po na provision nung proposal ni Senator Ping Lacson ay yung Section 8. Paano po yung provision ng Section 7? Paano po yun, Sir Cito? Tingnan nyo po, bigyan ko po kayo ng isang halimbawa. June 30, hindi pa makapanumpa ang presidente for whatever reason na na-elect. June 30, hindi pa rin po makapanumpa ang vice president na na-elect for whatever reason. Anong nakalagay po sa Section 7? Pagsisimula ng term. Ang sabi, Sir Cito, ang Senate President, ang acting president. Take note, acting po, hindi permanent, acting lang.
But also because Senate has an overlapping term. So kumbaga laging merong grupo 12 na senador na carry over. So the Senate will always be on duty kahit na yung Congress nag-lapse na rin yung kanilang term. So Senate is in charge.
That is my point, Sir Cito. That is my point. That is the loophole of the provision of the Constitution. Yan nga po yung issue para sa akin na napakabigat na hindi pa natin na-realize. Take note po, the term of office of the 12 senators, every 2 years po ang ende. Diba? So kunyari po by 2022, 12 senador ang tapos ang term, Sir Cito. Kung 12 senador ang tapos ang term, and mag-e-elect tayo ng president, paano kung yung president na inelect natin by 2022 hindi makapagsimula ng June 30 at yung vice president na inelect natin ng 2022 ay hindi rin makapagsimula ng June 30? Tanungin ko po kayo, base sa Constitution, sinong papalit? Sasabihin niyo po sa akin, Sir Cito,
Senate President.
Meron po ba tayong Senate President by that time? Take note po.
Sandali.
They cannot elect a Senate President because to elect a Senate President, there should be a majority of the members of the Senate. Di po ba? 13 bobotong Senate President. Take note. Ngayon po, sasabihin nyo, may mga na-elect May mga na-elect, attorney, na mga senador. Remember po, ang una pong convening ng Congress ay yung pong 3rd Monday of July. Yung pong SONA. At doon sila nag-elect ng Senate President.
Okay.
So meaning parang inassume lang sa ligang batas natin na may Senate President by June 30 when in fact wala po. Maaaring merong senator, halimbawa si Senate President Tito Soto, take note po, tapos ang term ni Senate President Tito Soto by 2022 as Senate President. So sino Senate President po by 2022, June 30? Wala po.
Wala.
So something will happen or something hindi makapag-assume ang president na nanalo o yung vice president na nanalo. Sino pong uupo na Senate President? Wala po.
Okay.
Sasabihin nyo sa akin, punta tayo doon sa susunod. Speaker of the House. May speaker na po at that time. Wala pa rin may speaker because tapos na rin po yung term kung sino man yung speaker kasi nga po ng June 30 and they will have to elect the new speaker by July.
Okay. Pero
ang sabihin po,
hindi, gets ko yung ibig mo sabihin din, malinaw naman Pero, ewan ko kasi matagal na akong graduate sa elementary at high school Baka nagbago na yung sistema natin, Natatandaan ko, kung lahat, derecha, tepok lahat, pwede pa rin umupo yung Chief Justice, di ba?
wala po kasi nakalagay doon sa succession eh. Wala po nakalagay sa konstitusyon. Hindi po 'yun nakalagay. Yun po yung palagay ko, Sir Cito, yun yung gusto ni Senator Ping Lacson ngayon doon sa pangalawang portion, yung
Okay.
section 8.
Pero ang problema ko dun sa suggestion, and binabase ko lang kasi, alam mo, hindi ko naman nakakausap si Senator Lacson, medyo mailap sa atin yan. Binabasa ko lang sa dyaryo at saka sa mga news brief sa media. Ang gusto niya, the sitting president will designate the survivor. Kumbaga, okay, kung mamatay kaming lahat, si attorney so-and-so will be the one to, or si secretary so-and-so will be the designated survivor. So parang, ang worry ko dyan is, baka mamaya dahil mayroon nang na-assign na designated survivor, hindi naman na disgrasya yung Vice President or your Senate President or Speaker, biglang kontra si designated survivor. Teka, ako yung in-appoint na presidente, I will assume office. Patay tayong lahat dyan.
Yung pong proposal ni Senator Ping Lacson, naglagay po siya ng 3 pa na pwedeng pumalit kung sakasakaling ang President, Vice President, ang Senate President, ang Speaker ay nawala rin lahat. Either permanent capacity or namatay. Ang sabi po niya, yung pinaka-senior na senator. Pagka po wala na rin lahat, yung pinaka-senior na senator, yung pinaka-senior na member of the House of Representatives based po sa number of years of service doon sa House of Representatives. Kung wala rin dahil kasama rin sa nawala, ang susunod po, dapat daw po bago magkaroon ng isang function o isang activity na naandun lahat ng mga opisyal na nabanggit, ay magkakaroon ng isang designated survivor o isang member of the cabinet na kung saan ilalagay siya sa isang secret place na protected, at kung sakasakaling nawala yung lahat ng order of succession to serve as acting, take note po Sir Cito, acting president, siya po yung magiging acting president. Ang gusto ko pong liwanagin, acting lang naman po, hindi naman po sinabi siya na yung president. In fact po, kung yung cabinet na yon siya lang ang nag-survive sa lahat ng opisyal na binanggit, pag manunumpa po siya bilang acting president. Okay. Hanggang sa pag-elect tayo, Sir Cito, ng isang presidente talaga na ipapatawag kaagad ng Kongreso o magpapatawag kaagad ng eleksyon para lang magkaroon tayo ng permanent president na magse-serve doon sa unexpired portion.
Okay, maraming salamat Dean Garcia. As always, nagle-lecture ka sa agenda at marami kaming natututunan. Kung ako ang tatanungin mo, parang mas madaling mag-elect na lang ng Senate President in transition. But that's a different story. We can discuss that in another episode of Agenda. Thank you very much, Dean. Marami kaming natutunan at mabuti naman ikaw ang nag-fill in the blanks because like I said, hindi naman tayo kontrapelo kay Senator Lacson. Wala lang talaga tayong access na katulad mo na nakukuha mo lahat yung data. Thank you very much, Attorney.
Sir Cito, thank you.
Okay. Yan po si Attorney George Garcia, Dean of the College of Law of the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Okay, tayo po ay magbe-break and after the break, we will bring in our main event. Si Senator Frank Drilon, si Congresswoman Stella Quimbo, and si Professor Julio Teehankee para pag-usapan nila itong political dynasty in cooperation with Academia, I hope I said it right, Academia Filipino. Okay, mamaya babasahin ko ng maayos. We'll go for a break. Okay, we're back here on Agenda via Signal TV channels 8 and 250, as well as facebook.com/OneNewsPH and on YouTube, OneNewsPH. Okay, today's second part of the program, we are going to be listening to set of speakers who will talk to us, educate us about their views on political dynasties. We are doing this in cooperation with Akademyang Pilipino, an association of some of the country's eminent achievers and thinkers that aims to meet the Philippines' most crucial challenges in building a just and sovereign nation through dialogues with decision and policy makers. The Academia holds forums and other events for such rational discussion. So honestly po, this is their program. So, or this is their event, okay? And tayo po ay ika nga na tayo yung events place this morning. Okay, our first speaker today is a veteran public servant and lawmaker. Senator Franklin Drilon is currently the Senate Minority Floor Leader. He has also been Senate President and Secretary of the Department of Justice. Mr. Senator, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Cito. Thank you very much, and thank you for having us in this program. You know, Cito, 5 weeks ago, I became a bookender in the President's State of the Nation address because of the views I expressed on political dynasties. I do not know where our discussion on the same subject will bring me this morning. 3 years ago, in 2017, I recall that you posed this question in your column, quote, "Has it ever occurred to any of you that we have elections every 3 years, but in most places, the names on the ballots and the results use the same surname," unquote. Cito, you may have asked that question out of frustration and disgust. I share your sentiment. A year and a half from now, we will have another election. And I fear that the ballots will carry the same surnames of politicians that we have seen in the past elections. That is almost a certainty because of the failure of Congress to enact an enabling law that will implement the constitutional prohibition on political dynasties. What is a political dynasty? The Philippine Institute on Development Studies, or PIDS, defines it simply as a family that holds on to political power by maintaining control over one or more elective positions, such as when A, relatives succeed each other in occupying the same elective position, or B, relatives occupy multiple elective positions simultaneously. Article 2, Section 26 of the Constitution provides, quote, the state shall guarantee equal access to opportunities for public service and prohibit political dynasties as may be defined by law, unquote. The Constitution, Cito, is clear. There must be equal access to opportunities for public service. To this end, the Constitution commands the prohibition of political dynasties. Sadly, this provision needs an enabling law. To date, Congress has not fulfilled that mandate. 33 years had passed, and all the bills that would have banned political dynasties died in the legislative mill. I have been voting for the passage of an anti-political dynasty measure since the 14th Congress. I can speak on this matter freely because I do not belong to a political dynasty. I filed anti-dynasty bills in the 17th and 18th Congresses. These bills would prohibit a spouse, a person related to an incumbent elective official within the second degree of consanguinity or affinity, whether legitimate or illegitimate, full or half-blood, from holding or running for any elective position in the same province in the same election. Do political dynasties help or hinder progress? Again, the PIDS asserts that the political dynasties hinder progress. First, the study found that dynasties are pervasive in the 10 poorest provinces in the country, which are afflicted by low levels of human development, bad governance, violence, and poor business climate. A paper published by the Oxford Development Studies found empirical evidence showing that more dynasties cause greater poverty, particularly outside Metro Manila. Second, PIDS argues that when power is concentrated in a few families, the monopoly of such political power weakens the checks and balances in government. Third, the authors held the view that dynasties weaken competition. It reduces and even deters access by alternative and youth leaders to the political system. Even in the party list system, which had the intention of providing representation to the underrepresented, has been infiltrated by dynasties. Finally, the authors concluded that dynasties perpetuate personality-based politics. Investment is placed not on reform or party platforms, but on the family's reputation and on the person of the candidate. Cito, you said in your column, quote, it is because there are no other choices. No one dares to contest, and no one can afford to join the contest, unquote. I agree with you, Cito. There are no other options, not because there are no other qualified candidates, but because of the pervasiveness of political dynasties. A study by the Ateneo School of Government reveals a grim reality. 81% of the governors, 78% of congressmen, 69% of the mayors, 57% of vice mayors belong to political dynasties. This study by the Ateneo School of Government found that, quote, the results of the 2019 midterm elections demonstrated the capability of political dynasties to stay in power as fat dynasties remain entrenched in many parts of the country. Over the past 30 years, or 10 election periods, political dynasties have become fatter. Covering all local positions, the percentage of fat dynasties has increased from 19% of all locally elected officials in 1988 to 29% in 2019, growing at about 1% or around 170 positions per election period, unquote. During the Senate hearings, Dean Ronald Mendoza of the Ateneo School of Government said that, based on these trends, the window for reform is fast closing. 4 presidents from now, according to Dean Mendoza, or by 2040, 70% of the local governments will be dynastic. This poses a serious threat to our democracy. As Dean Mendoza said, quote, "We are slowly becoming less democratic over time, particularly in the poorest areas of the country, because of the prevalence of political dynasties," unquote. In the same hearing, Dean Mendoza explained that, quote, "In these places where dynasty is present, our fellow Filipinos can no longer speak up, can no longer challenge their leaders because they assume that these political clans have captured everything and would provide for them. They depend on their political clans for their health care, for the education of their children, for their livelihood. We cannot expect them to fight and say, ayaw namin ng dynasty. And so, we must fight for them," unquote, said the good Dean. An anti-political dynasty law will not cure the ill effects of the dynastic rule. It will not only cure the ill effects of the dynastic rule, it will also democratize the election process. It will give others an opportunity to seek public office and offer the electorate more and perhaps better choices. With genuine competition, the quality of public service will likely improve. If there is a wider field of choice and a real possibility of being replaced by other capable candidates, the incumbents will be compelled to do their jobs properly. The basic concept of competition is applicable here. We do not want commerce and industry to be left in the hands of a few because the quality of service suffers. If we apply this principle to businesses, then with even more reason that we should apply it to public service because we do not want power concentrated in the hands of a few. Dean Mendoza also pointed out that before we think of delving into deep reforms, such as shifting to federalism, we need to strengthen our political system first because absent these preconditions, a new system with the same weaknesses will not produce a different result. An anti-political dynasty law is doable. The Sangguniang Kabataan Reform Act, the enactment of which I supported when I was Senate President, includes a landmark provision prohibiting political dynasties under Section 10, which reads, quote, "An official of the Sangguniang Kabataan, either elective or appointee, must not be related within the second civil degree of consanguinity or affinity to any incumbent elected national official or to any incumbent elected regional, provincial, city, or barangay official in the locality where he or she seeks to be elected," unquote. You know, Cito, I proposed a similar anti-dynasty provision in the recently enacted Bangsamoro Basic Law. However, it encountered stiff opposition. I distinctly remember being told that if I would insist on the anti-dynasty provision in the Bangsamoro Basic Law, mauubos po ang pinuno ng ARMM. But, as Dean Mendoza said during the hearing, the response would be, quote, "That is the point. we cannot develop good governance and strong political parties when it is the starting point, when its starting point is already captured, unquote. Thank you very much, Cito, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Senator, and please stick around. We will attempt a Q&A later in the program because I myself I have about 4 or 5 questions to ask you. Thank you for your initial presentation. We'll get back to you. Thank you. That's Senator Frank Drilon, and now let's bring in the representative from the 2nd District of Marikina City. She is a health economist, an academician who served as a professor and department chair of the UP School of Economics. She has an extensive research portfolio, which includes health economics, industrial organization, public policy, and regulation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Congresswoman Stella Quimbo. Good morning, Congresswoman.
Hi, Cito. Good morning. How much time do I have?
We will let you know, but in any case, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes for your presentation.
All right.
Uninterrupted, all yours.
All right. So first of all, I congratulate Senator Drilon on his bill, which is a much needed step towards ensuring equal opportunities in public service. Allow me to wear my hat as an economist. So indeed, political dynasties and poverty appear to coexist. And studies have shown that in provinces where political dynasties exist, poverty incidence is higher. But while poverty and dynasties appear to be correlated, the question to ask is this a causal relationship? In other words, do political dynasties actually cause people to be poor? For example, do leaders who have relatives occupying other leadership positions actually want their constituents to be poor and will do what they can to keep them poor, presumably because keeping them poor allows dynasties to perpetuate themselves? Or does poverty cause dynasties? Meaning, do the poor tend to vote in favor of members of a political dynasty? And if so, what could be the reasons for such? Could it be name recall, perhaps vote buying, or maybe even a genuine preference for them? My humble opinion is that I have not seen any compelling evidence that traces the causal pathways of political dynasties to poverty. Nonetheless, what we suspect is that political dynasties could be harmful. Do leaders want to keep their people poor? To be honest, I'm not sure. I've yet to meet a member of a political dynasty who exudes this vibe. Besides, with the advent of the PCOS machine and social media, re-election would be more difficult if people stay poor, because precisely that economic hardship will be attributed to the leadership. Is there a weaker incentive for dynasties to do a good job in terms of economic development? Perhaps. I co-wrote a paper in 2012 with my colleagues in UP on the effects of term limits on local government provision of PhilHealth sponsorships for indigent households. And what we found was that governors who were on their last term spent more on PhilHealth sponsorships, possibly to increase their chances of re-election after 3 years. But we found the opposite effect, meaning governors spent less on PhilHealth sponsorships if they belong to a political dynasty, which we interpreted as political dynasties tend to make leaders lazier, thinking that re-election is in the bag. Now, what are the economic structures in poorer provinces that appear to perpetuate political dynasties? In less developed local economies, where business opportunities are scant, the biggest employer is government. Most families will have a member who is an employee of the incumbent official, in which case the desire to preserve one's job could be the primordial reason for why he or she would vote in favor of re-election or electing the incumbent's successor. On the other hand, those who do not work for government are likely to be in the minority and will have no strength in number during elections. Do incumbents have the incentive to enjoin family members to enter into politics? In other words, create dynasties? Perhaps. And I think this is true regardless of whether this is in good or in bad faith. If the intention is to enrich oneself, then having a successor within the family ensures that the revenue stream is longer, and as such, the willingness to spend on vote buying is stronger. Moreover, because political power can result in market power, meaning political dynasties also end up controlling businesses, then the cost of elections can simply be viewed as, quote unquote, an investment. On the other hand, if the intention is good and arguably aligned with long-term economic development, presumably for legacy purposes, there is a need to bring in a family member in the face of term limits, especially if the work is not yet done. Nonetheless, I believe while the senator's bill is important, we should consider other measures to ensure that we are truly able to change the political landscape of our country. Pseudo-political dynasties can still arise even with such a law in place. What happens, for example, when a termed-out official's chief of staff or paramour seeks to replace him or her? Or what about elective officials with relatives appointed to high-ranking positions in the executive or the judiciary? These are beyond the scope of the bill, and arguably, these contribute to the concentration of power. The exercise in drawing the line can become interesting and difficult. Ultimately, what is important is that the people are able to make genuine choices of leaders and that such leaders are able to make genuine change. We need electoral reforms and enforcement to ensure that elections are clean and honest. If the PICOS machines work and if people trust these, then anytime an incumbent official does a bad job, then the people can effectively use the PICOS machines to choose a better leader regardless of family name. We need to effectively enforce laws against vote buying. We need to ensure that fake news does not thrive. We need to empower voters. Finally, the biggest weapon against political dynasties is poverty eradication. The issue of whether political dynasties are harmful or not largely goes away with poverty. In this case, the issue of political dynasties redounds to a single-faceted issue of lack of opportunities, which is precisely what is embodied in the Constitution. Then the task at hand is simply to ensure that elections are clean and honest, so the voice of the people is heard and acted upon. Thank you, Cito.
Okay, thank you for being brief and to the point with your presentation, Congresswoman. We request that you stay on for the Q&A later, or at least for our discussion on the matter. Let's bring in now the third and final speaker is Professor Julio Teehankee of De La Salle University. He previously served as DLSU College of Liberal Arts Dean from 2013 to 2017. He has published extensively on political and electoral reforms, particularly on patronage, politics, and political dynasties. Professor Teehankee, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Cito. Thank you very much for having me. I would like to further emphasize the imperatives of passing the enabling law that will realize the constitutional provision on political dynasties. Political families and their extended clans have been an enduring feature of Philippine politics. In the political science literature, political dynasties refer to the concentration, consolidation, or perpetuation of political power in persons related to one another. Most members of political dynasties have raised three arguments in their defense. First, they say that the Philippines is a democracy. Second, they are elected. And third, they argue that term limits resulted in the increase of political dynasties in the post-Marcos period. As a political scientist, I have studied and published on the topic of political dynasties since the 1990s. Please allow me to share with you some empirical data from my research. Historically, a total of 319 political clans have controlled local and national politics. Of this number, 234 or 73% continued to dominate the recently concluded 2019 midterm elections. Furthermore, 220 or 70% have held local positions for at least 2 decades. There is a cycle of emergence, maintenance, decline, and replacement of political dynasties. Of the total 319 political families, 111 or 35% are considered durable or have been active since the colonial and post-colonial period. For example, the Ortega clan have dominated the politics of La Union for more than 100 years. 124 or 39% of dominant political families have emerged in the last 4 decades. For example, the most dominant political clan in the country right now is that of the president, no? President Rodrigo Duterte. 50 or 16% are considered dormant political families that used to be dominant but suffered some electoral or political setbacks, but still possess the machinery to make a comeback. And again, for an example, for the first time since 1987, there is no sitting member of the Aquino family in national or local government elective position. On the other hand, the formerly dormant Marcos dynasty after EDSA has now regained its dominance in local and national politics. 34 or 10% are defunct or have completely disappeared from the political arena. For example, there have been no elected member of the Laurel clan since 2001, and the next generation have decided to pursue other professions. So based on the figures, one can observe that despite being one of the oldest democracies in Asia, the kind of democracy we have in this country is considered an elite democracy. While members of political families are elected, they benefit from the incumbency advantage which allow them to maintain their political machinery. And lastly, political dynasties are dominant with or without term limits, as we have seen by the historical data. Now, according again to the study of the Ateneo School of Government, the average dynastic share for elective position between 2007 and 2016 is as follows: 81% governor, 78% congressmen, 69% mayors, and 57% vice mayor. According to the same study, 70% of the local government official will be dynastic by 2040. And at the House, the average dynastic share between 1987 and 2019 now stands at 70%. A more disturbing trend at the lower house is that the party list seats, which was originally intended for the marginalized and underrepresented, is now being populated by political dynasties. So, Cito, we claim to be a democracy. We regularly hold elections, but if 70 to 80% of all elected positions in government are dominated by political dynasties, whose interests do they represent? I would like to say that public office is a public trust. It should not be treated as a family heirloom. Thank you very much, Cito.
Okay, I am sorry. I was on mute. We will go for a quick break, and we will bring back our speakers after the break, and we will ask them all the questions that need to be asked here on agenda. Please don't go away. You're back here on Agenda, and we are blessed in our cooperation with Akademyang Pilipino to bring in a powerhouse of speakers regarding political dynasty, and their presentations are truly educational. Let's bring back our guest, Senator Drilon, Congresswoman Quimbo, and Professor Teehankee. Thank you for, there we go, Congresswoman. Okay. Okay. I guess my first question would be to Senator Drilon. Are there any good political dynasties we can speak of in the Philippines, or lahat ba sila bad?
Well, I am. I do not want to go into that debate because that is subjective. What I can say is that that debate is over because there is already a constitutional mandate to enact an anti-dynasty law. The debate as to whether they're good or bad for our economy is over. That principle and that debate and that philosophy was settled when the authors of the Constitution ordered Congress to enact. And up to now, we have not enacted one. So to me, the policy debate is over.
Okay, now Congresswoman Quimbo, and guys, you can all join in whenever you want to. It's your forum. I'm just hosting, but I just need to throw in the question. But question is, Congresswoman Quimbo, the good senator is saying the Constitution ordered Congress to enact an enabling law regarding anti-political dynasty. Is that a pipe dream? May pag-asa ba yan sa Kongreso?
Well, kasasabi lang po ni Professor Teehankee, 78% daw of Congress people belong to political dynasties. So that's more than majority of the vote, right? So mahirap. But ako personally, of course, as I said earlier, of course, I do support the bill of the good senator. Ang sa akin lang naman is, it cannot stand alone. Kung mag-isa lang po siya, and let's say, for example, enforcement against vote buying continues to be poor, baka hindi rin natin ma-achieve ang kailangan natin ma-achieve through this law. So, baka maiba lang ang timeline of activities ng isang elected official. Like, kasi mangyayari dyan is, magkaka-break ka lang di ba? You're allowed to go on break on the 9th to the 12th year, right? And then you make a comeback on the 12th year. That's my understanding of the bill, di ba? So, sa akin, baka naman ganun pa rin ang outcomes, maiiba lang ang timing ng activities. Ibig sabihin, on the 6th to the 9th year of an elected official's term, maiiba lang ang nature of the activities in case, for example, vote buying continues to be rampant.
Okay. What about you, Professor Teehankee? I noticed you wanted to say something.
Yes, I have emphasized time and time again that it's not a question of good or bad dynasties. No? It's a question of good or bad systems. No? And if you have a system that has perpetuated this kind of concentration of power in the hands of a few political dynasties or clans, then definitely it's a bad system. No? We would also like to distinguish between two types of dynasties as developed by Dean Ronald Mendoza of Ateneo School of Government. You have what he calls fat dynasties that have more than two family members simultaneously occupying government positions. Yung tinatawag nating sabay-sabay. While there are the other traditional type of political dynasties whose members succeed each other in office, no? Yung sunod-sunod. Now, if it's a question of the lesser evil, of course, what we have is the traditional legacy candidates, no? Yung sunod-sunod, no? So you have a history of the tanyadas na sunod-sunod in public service, no? What is more detrimental to political competition ay yung tinatawag nating fat dynasties, no? Yung sabay-sabay, no? And what we aim at pushing for a regulation, no, in realizing the constitutional provision of the regulation on political dynasties, that we eliminate or we lessen the so-called fat dynasties.
Okay. Senator Drilon, and I'm sorry, Senator, no? Medyo tanga ako dito. Honestly, unahan ko na kayo, no? Tanga ako dito. Pero I've seen some people go to the Supreme Court, eh. Yung parang doon sa environmental, yung mga ganito, ganon. They went to the Supreme Court to force government to act on certain issues. Dito kasi parang, I know there's separation of powers and all. Who is going to tell Congress the Constitution says so and you must do so? Because unless that happens, your sincere efforts is not going to fly.
That's correct. Well, in this particular case, Cito, nobody can go to the Supreme Court. It will not prosper because you cannot compel Congress to do what it is required to do, since it is a political institution. The remedy is in the coming election, somebody can take can go on the platform of passing an anti-dynasty law, and theoretically, the people will judge if the other candidate belongs to a dynasty, whether or not the issue should be voted upon. And the issue will be voted upon as a political issue, not as a judicial issue. But having said that, Cito, let me just react quickly to Stella's point. I agree with all her points that the enactment of the anti-political dynasty law cannot be a standalone provision. It must have other reforms in place. And that is why I also filed a Political Party Reform Act in order to reform our political parties, so that, for example, changing your political parties as fast as you change your wardrobe will no longer be feasible. And, you know, the influence of the contributors will no longer influence the legislation or the government policies that will be enacted. So I fully agree with Stella. The anti-political dynasty law cannot be standalone. It must be accompanied by other reform measures. So that is my response. Thank you, Cito.
Okay. You want to react, Professor?
Yes, I totally agree with Senator Drilon. I have advocated for political reforms, electoral reforms, in combination with the passage of the legislation on anti-political dynasty. And I believe that, of course, in the case of economics, no, as Congresswoman Quimbo already mentioned, no, if you have instances in which you have a monopoly or an oligopoly, it's an indication of a market failure. The existence of political dynasties in this country for a long period in time is also an indication of political market failure. No? I have served under former Chief Justice Renato Puno in his consultative committee to review the Constitution, and I chaired the committee on political and electoral reforms. And I was happy to have convinced the members of the Puno Commission to push for self-executing provision of political dynasty and other similar political reforms, like, for example, the anti-party switching provision, self-executing. But when the report of the Puno Commission was passed to the previous Congress, the very first thing that they dropped were all the political and electoral reforms that I helped introduce in that draft. So I think it's really a big challenge because, of course, those who are benefit from the current system will definitely resist any attempts at reform. So it's going to be a collective effort that should include the public, no, and we should include the people in this effort to push really for political and electoral and the passage of all these reforms, including the ban on political dynasties.
Okay, I'd like to ask our legislators. It's always historically always been an issue of horse trading. What will I get if I give up? Can this be resolved by addressing term limits, for instance? I don't know if it's too late in the game, because some people might say, oh sige, wala na tayong political dynasty, pero habaan ng term limits ng mga senador or ng mga congressman, congresswoman. I'd start with Congresswoman Stella.
Well, Cito, I won't be here today kung walang term limits. Diba? So I can speak for myself, but it's just a sample of one. So it's very clear, kung wala saan ang term limit, I would still be an academic at this point, right? So from where I stand, I sit, I somehow appreciate that argument. Halimbawa, in the US, wala naman pong term limits. May mga senador doon na talagang 30 years silang nagsaserve. But at the point in time na ayaw na sa kanila ng taong bayan, then goodbye. So, but of course, again, we respect the Constitution. Talaga naman, if we end up defining political dynasties this way and term limits are there, then we respect that.
Okay, Senator Drilon?
Well, the term limit to me is good and should be maintained. Stella here is an example why you should have term limits. No offense to my good friend. Oh, he's equally competent, but maybe Stella is more competent. But anyway, as I said, the term limit is good, and it at least to its limited extent, it allows a wider choice after the terms have expired. But obviously, it is a political reform that should be maintained and complemented by other measures such as the anti-political dynasty and the reforming our political party structure, and even reforming our party list system, which again is infiltrated by the dynasty. So yes, I am in favor of retaining the term limits.
Okay, I'm going to ask the nasty question, not to you guys, but in general, and I hope no one will throw stones at my window. But kasi may mga nagsasabi, and it's been said many times, how can we expect changes in the political system when the majority of voters are not, to be nice about it, sophisticated enough, not politically literate, and they are corruptly pragmatic. Kumbaga, pera-pera lang yan, so tanggapin na lang namin pera, bahala na kayo dyan, total, wala namang epekto sa amin yan. What do we do in a situation like that? Because it's a democracy, again, Professor, and it's a numbers game. So the masses make the decision for us.
Well, I beg to disagree, Cito, no? Because I've always been against that line of thinking, because it's like blaming the victims, no? The poor voters are already victims of the unjust, inequitable system that we have, and the reason why they vote the way they do is because they're not given any clear choice, no? So I think it's not a question of demand on the demand side, but rather it's a question of the supply side, no? So my solution to this is actually institutional, no? That's why I agree with Senator Drilon that we should push really for building public institutions, no? Which include really working on our bureaucracy to be able to effectively and efficiently deliver public service, and especially pump prime the economy so that it will address the question of poverty. On the other hand, we should also really take into serious consideration how we should professionalize our political party system. Because if we have strong political parties, then the question of political clans and dynasties will be multi-academic, because if the political parties will now be the venue by which these dynasties and clans should compete, and the party should decide who among them should be the candidates that will compete with other political parties, with political families competing within each political party. So it's like a primary system in the United States. No? So if you have a strong political party, then all of these families should compete within that party to be the candidate that will compete with other candidates.
What about devoting ourselves to this battle? Kasi I fully support you, Senator Drilon, and I think it's something that has to be done, especially yung mga yung mga party list na yan. But here's the thing. I remember when the pro-federalism people kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and everybody started jumping into the bandwagon until the president himself kind of coldly let go of the reins. Dito sa anti-dynasty, I don't see, hear, or know of any devoted group of people who have taken a position. We are going to promote this, push this, organize this, and push this through Congress and Senate and in media. Kasi parang, ayan, pumutok because of Akademyang Pilipino. We're discussing it. I'm really thankful to you guys because it's very educational. But what about organizing people to fight this?
Well, to be fair, Cito, no, there have been several people's organization in the past that have pushed for this. No, it has become a natural cycle. No, especially when we near the electoral season. No, there will always be groups of people that will advocate, or individuals who will advocate for the passage of this provision, or the anti-political dynasty provision. But unfortunately, it's difficult to sustain because every now and then, every electoral season, we see some big political dynasties falling. Like in the previous election, we saw institutional political dynasties being defeated, like the Estradas. No, but yet they're just a handful. No, I guess there are 32 families, political dynasties that have lost in the previous midterm election, but 32% is just a small percentage of the entire 319 political families in the Philippines. No? So I think there should be a bigger sustained effort by the public.
Yeah, what about you, Senator Drilon? I mean, it could be your legacy. You could be the champion.
Yeah, when one believes that a certain principle should be pushed, he would push it. I will push it, even if I realize that it is not a sexy issue today. A lot of other priorities would be in the media, but there has to be a start, Cito. We cannot say that there's still support from media, there's still support from your fellow legislators. This will not succeed. Okay, but this is a principle which I think everybody agrees with, and therefore we must continue to push it because it is a starting point. And we cannot develop good governance and strong political parties when we cannot even get to the starting point. And this is an anti-political dynasty.
Okay, I love this question. Shouldn't there be a minimum qualification to run for public office? For voters, shouldn't there also be a minimum requirement to file tax returns, even if there is no income tax to be declared, so as to establish and certify identity, as well as to avoid double voting? This will also strengthen the national ID system. Congresswoman Quimbo, kayo naman po.
Actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with the minimum qualifications as defined today. Yeah, meaning we just need to be able to read and write, and of course, citizenship, etc. Ang sa akin, Cito, kung yan ang gusto ng taong bayan at alam naman nila na yan ang qualifications, why not, right? Ang sa akin is as long as the genuine voice of the people would be heard, that for me is okay. And if I may, Cito, just return very quickly to the point that you made earlier, whether
Yes.
it is an issue of poverty. I would like to agree with you that it is certainly an issue of poverty, meaning political dynasties is certainly an issue of poverty. But we don't know exactly what it is about poverty that really perpetuates political dynasties. It could be, as you said, it could be ignorance, it could be lack of education, but it also could be lack of economic opportunities. In many places, as I said in my 5-minute talk, in many places, the biggest employer is really the government. Wala talagang economic opportunities. So if there's more economic development, there are more businesses, there are more employers, that for me is the competitive constraint on political dynasties in a political marketplace. So I completely agree with the Senator, we really need genuine competition. The question is, saan manggagaling ang competition na yan? Diba? Hindi naman necessarily just within the political marketplace. Right? If there are more economic opportunities outside the political marketplace or more employers, sa tingin ko isang paraan yan para ma-empower ang voter at hindi na baling mawalan ka ng trabaho halimbawa sa munisipyo kung alam mo naman that there's a vibrant business community outside, then that will embolden you as a voter to change your leader if you want to.
Senator Frank, yeah, go ahead, Senator Frank.
First, I do not believe that the enactment of the anti-political dynasty is the answer to everything. Certainly, poverty would require more than the passage of an anti-dynasty provision. But as I would go back to my first statement, the time for debate is over. The Constitution has stated this, and it is our obligation as legislators to follow the mandate of the Constitution. And therefore, we must pass this anti-political dynasty. How it will shape, I do not know. But we must have one, because I strongly believe that this is one aspect that we must look at as one of the many reforms that we should do. So I completely agree with Stella. It is not the be-all and end-all to our poverty situation, but certainly it cannot harm our efforts to bring our people out of poverty.
Okay, we're down to our final minutes. I'll give Professor Teehankee and Congresswoman Quimbo 2 minutes each. I'll start with you, Professor Teehankee, and then Congresswoman Stella for your final statement. Professor?
Yes, thank you, Cito. Again, I'd like to reiterate that public office is a public trust. It should not be treated as a family heirloom. The issue is not about good or bad dynasties. It's about good or bad systems. And a system that entrenches a large number of political families for centuries is definitely not a good system. Now, if there are good members of the political dynasties, the good dynasties should sacrifice themselves and to dismantle the bad dynasties. No? So they should rise above their own personal clan interests, and they should help pass the anti-dynasty law.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Teehankee. Congresswoman Stella Quimbo, your turn.
Well, I'm a major advocate of competition because any form of competition, whether in the business community or in the political marketplace, competition will always benefit the voter or the consumer, because with competition, you would end up with wider choices and, of course, better choices. So I'm all for this. I hope it sees the light of day. Good luck, Senator. Of course, I'll be there to support you.
Okay, thank you very much, Congresswoman. And finally, Senator Frank Drilon, your parting message, sir.
Thank you. Well, the resistance of Congress in performing its constitutionally mandated duty of passing an anti-dynasty law, to me, is preventing the strengthening of our political parties, as well as the growth of alternative leaders, and to a great extent, our economic growth. We must level the playing field in the political arena, because only then can genuine change truly come. That is what we must endeavor to give to the public in 2022. It is a task. The task is hard, yes, but not impossible. I still hope against hope that my fellow legislators will rise above personal interest so that Congress will finally fulfill its constitutional duty to enact an enabling law on political dynasty. I do hope that that time is today. Thank you, Cito.
Thank you very much, Mr. Senator. And that, ladies and gentlemen, are the presentations and discussion for today. We want to thank Academiang Filipino for giving us this special privilege to host, to be the channel for this very informative event. And sa inyo pong mga naging bisita namin, my only suggestion, Professor, Senator, and Congresswoman, may I suggest well, hindi naman pwedeng road trip, pero damihan nyo yung webinar ninyo, because this morning, personally as a journalist, was very educational for me. The data, the legislation, and the reality of politics from all three of you are very eye-opening, and I think one thing we have hope on, which is beginning to be the writing on the wall, are the millennials. Dito po sa Pasig, bago na ang aming political setup. Sa San Juan, nagbago. Sa Manila, nagbago. And many other parts. And it is not a condemnation of past families, but change has come and change will continue to come. Thank you very much, Senator Frank Drilon, for spearheading this effort. And thank you, Congresswoman. Maraming salamat, Congresswoman Stella Quimbo. As always, a regular on agenda. And Professor Teehankee. God bless all of you and more power to all of you. Okay, that's agenda for today. And dun po sa inyo sa mga nakapanood, I hope that you will share what you've heard, what you've read. I really found those data, those statistics very informative and medyo nakakagimbal po na yung iba dyan, mga kakilala ko pa, no? Pero hindi ko akalaing ganun na pala sila katagal sa politika. Yung iba naman ay talagang, I think the saddest part of Professor Teehankee's presentation was that the 10 poorest provinces in the country have one thing in common, and they are political dynasties. Now, wala pong personalan, pero iba na po, hindi na po public service, naging negosyo na, naging power trip na, etc. So, I do hope that the bill of Senator Franklin Drilon really gains momentum. And kayo po, no? When you hear the topic, political dynasty, the discussion, don't turn off. Don't switch off. Don't surf. Pay attention and give your input. Kasi para yan yung federalism, para yan yung tourism, marami pong mga topics noon na hindi pinapatulan, hindi natin pinapansin. Bandang huli, medyo na-realize natin, if we all join in, something will happen. And I think the best example is what's happening now in our health service. Dati, ang tumal-tumal ng paggalaw ng Universal Healthcare Act na, no, naging law na, we did not invest in our hospitals, etc. We did not value government frontliners, mga nurses, mga government doctors. And when COVID-19 hit us and killed many of us, then and only then did we realize that when the pain visits you, it becomes real. Don't wait for political dynasties to affect you and make things, difficult for you. That's all for today. I'm Cito Beltran. Thank you for joining us On Agenda, and thank you to Academiang Filipino for inviting us to host the event. Thank you. Good day and God bless.